After a huge growth year, and now we are starting to see property markets around Australia slow down. As investors, we really need to make the right decisions and capitalise on the best possible opportunity. Now, unfortunately, we do see a lot of average investors make many mistakes when purchasing investment properties. So in today's video, we're going to take you through 5 of those mistakes so that you can avoid making them to ensure that you get a much better result when you go out there and purchase your next investment property. Thanks so much for coming in today again, Chris, to shoot some of these videos and talk through some of the common mistakes that a lot of investors do make, especially when they've got a little bit of lack of experience, because it's a challenging industry. And the reality is we all only end up buying 3, 4, maybe 5 properties throughout our whole entire journey. So it's quite difficult to gain that experience that a buyer's agent like you actually gets when buying, 2 to 4 properties every single week. So, from your experience, what have you learned that is a really common mistake that a lot of first-time or inexperienced investors actually make?
I think the main one is no clear strategy, and we always harp on about this. Before you go out there and find a property because you see it online and it looks nice, or your mum's told you that her neighbour's selling and it sounds like a good idea, you really need to identify the right strategy for you. So figuring out what your long-term goals are for you and your family, what your short-term goals are, so what you want to achieve in the next 5 years. You need to speak to your accountants and mortgage brokers. You need to figure out what's going to work for you, your partner, your family, if you're on your own, just exactly what's going to get you where you want to be in 15 years' time, and identify the strategy that is right for you.
Absolutely, and I think it's not the wild, wild west anymore. We're not shooting from the hip. You need to have a clear plan in life. You need to know what you're doing. And especially, as I said, if you're only buying a few properties throughout your whole entire life, you need to make sure that you're getting the best possible return on your investment. You need to make sure that you're not making any of these mistakes because you only get a few chances throughout your whole life to capitalize on these types of things. So strategy is always really important. Now, the first step to figuring out your strategy is to think about the ideal life that you want to be living. What type of things do you want to be doing? What type of income do you want to be earning? Where do you want to be living? What type of hobbies do you want to be implementing into your life? And just really having a well-rounded understanding of your ideal life, because then you can actually reverse engineer that back to what needs to happen next, and then we can start actually building a really clear short-term plan as to what can come next. Now, the second thing that we see most average investors struggling with is they're actually unaware of the things holding them back. Now, the reality is with the world, we all suffer from certain challenges. We all have things that hold us back, and our opinion is if you have awareness of those challenges, it's a first step to overcoming them. Now, why don't you talk through some of the common challenges that a lot of our investors actually suffer from on quite a regular basis?
Yeah, there's a few big ones. Firstly, not having the right team of advisors. So not having the right people around you that can help you execute on your strategy.
Yep.
So that's solicitors, that is accountants, that is mortgage brokers, the right person if you do buy a property that can conduct the building and pest inspections, even a good team of friends or peers that you can speak to about these things and soundboard your ideas with, which a lot of people don't have. We're really lucky that obviously we're in this industry, we work with each other, we all have this really big passion for property. And often what happens with clients that come to work with us, they're like, oh my God, it's so nice to speak to like-minded people, because they just have no one in their life that they can share these thoughts with. And so it's really nice to just have people around you that you can talk about property, talk about your plans. Those plans may change over time, but just to have ideas that you can bounce off someone with a good team of advisors, not only that are going to help you buy the property, but that are also going to just help you kind of with some guidance along the way around what you should and shouldn't be doing on your investment journey.
Yeah, and I feel like another challenge that a lot of people suffer from, and the next two kind of go one in another, which is having limited market knowledge, and because of that, sticking to their comfort zones.
Yep.
Australia's a massive country. There's over 15,000 suburbs around Australia. How are you meant to figure out where you should be allocating your funds and where you should be focusing on for your investment? Now, we've done some amazing videos in the past on how to identify the right strategy, how to identify the right market, how to identify the right suburb, the right property within that suburb, how to negotiate. And you can go and watch those videos if you need to build your understanding of how the Australian property market works so that you can get better results. But what I find is a lot of people struggle to identify which suburb it is that they want to be investing in that will enable them to achieve their long-term goals. So they revert back to their default, their comfort zone. They focus on the area that they grew up in or the area where their friends and family own property or have been investing. And not always is that the right decision. You know, especially when you see markets today like Sydney and Melbourne that have doubled in value over the last 10 years, that are now in a declining phase of their real estate cycle. If you're trying to generate some short-term returns on your investment, then it can be extremely challenging to do that in those markets. So what you need to do as an investor is have a much more well-rounded understanding of the Australian property market. You need to sometimes step outside of your comfort zone and look in other markets around Australia that may represent more value moving forward over the next 5 to 10 years to capitalise and generate the best return on your investment. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just touching on the comfort zone thing, I see it all the time, or I've seen it a lot in the past, especially obviously us growing up in Sydney. I've got some friends, and to get a decent deposit on a property down there, you've got to have 200 grand.
Yeah.
So I've got friends to try and save that money when you've got young kids. Takes a really long time. They could have 5 to 7 years ago purchased something for a few hundred grand in the Brisbane market. By now it would be worth 5, 6, 700 grand. They could have refinanced, sold, put on that investor mindset, gone out of their comfort zone and in a different way rather than hustling and grinding to try and save, gotten to their end goal a lot sooner, whereas right now they're still renting or living in small apartments and things like that because they just wanted to stick in the area they wanted to live in.
Yeah, they sacrificed lifestyle because they wanted to stick to their comfort zone, whereas they would actually have far more choice and far more freedom if they had have done a little bit more research and maybe communicated with a few different advisors, read a few different books in the early days. And I think it's really important to do that education and learn more about how this industry works, you know, with podcasts, YouTube channels, books, articles, blogs. There is limitless resources at our fingertips. So it is really a choice these days to figure out if you want to figure it out or if you don't, unfortunately. Now, I think that the third mistake that most investors face is probably the one that costs people the most amount of money long term. And this is not doing enough due diligence. Now, due diligence is the most important part of purchasing an investment property. With us and our business, probably 1 in 6 properties that we buy fall over on due diligence because they don't meet the criteria after doing a little bit more research on that property. So, Chris, can you please take us through our process of doing due diligence, the red flags that we want to avoid, and how you can avoid making those mistakes, and what happens if you do stumble across one of these things after you've purchased a property?
Yeah, of course. So this is what we spend most of our time in the office doing. It comes from speaking with clients, speaking with agents. Like, we spend a lot of time doing that as well. But 80% of what we do is behind the scenes before we even show someone a property. And it is things like looking where the property is located. Is it on a main road? Is it backing onto a train line? Is it backing onto a commercial development, industrial site, school or major shopping centre? Is there anything around that property that is going to potentially impact how that property might sell in the future? Who's going to rent the property or create overlays on that property from like a noise perspective and that sort of thing? So we're honestly ruling out, if we're looking at 80 suburbs across Brisbane, there's probably 200 properties a week listed. We get down to a list of about 10 that we might consider by immediately just ruling out properties that are in those locations.
It's literally ruling out 80 to 90% of the properties that come onto the market.
Yeah, it's really, really important, and people oversee that, and it's something you can do very, very easily by just looking at the map on the realestate.com ad before you even go into the next layer of due diligence that we do. So once we've done that, we're then looking into whether the property is situated on a small block. Our rule of thumb is often over 400 to 450 square metres, but ideally 600 square metres. So ruling out properties on small blocks, ruling out properties that are affected by flood zones. This can be found on most local council websites, but if it can't, it is a search your solicitor can do once you've purchased the property for a small extra fee. We're also ruling out properties whether they've got major easements on them. Agents can sometimes tell you this information and it can be listed on the title search. If not, again, most local council websites have access to whether there's an easement on your property or something that's affecting the size of the usable land that you actually are buying.
And you need to know what's underneath the land for development potential as well, because, you know, if you want to build a granny flat, knock down, rebuild a house, maybe do a subdivision or a townhouse development, like you can't go building on top of things that could be underneath the ground in terms of easements. Some things that we see in different parts of Brisbane is mining overlays. Other things that you might see is like, you know, tunnels or train lines underground, things like that as well. So you got to be cautious because that will impact your strategy as well. You know, if your strategy is to build a granny flat in the backyard to have multiple incomes from the property, or to do a knockdown rebuild to manufacture that value, or do a subdivision or something like that, you know, if you accidentally oversee this, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Most definitely. And I think once we've gotten to that point, we've ruled out properties on main roads, flood affected, these various overlays, looking at what's underground. You then potentially buy the property, or before you buy the property, may get a building and pest inspection done. So having the right partner to do that for you, and then having the knowledge or the right help to be able to decipher what's in that report, and then whether you are going to proceed with the property or not. So that's a big layer of due diligence, just to know, is this property going to be a money pit? Is there any major maintenance in the immediate future? Are things more long-term? And just having an understanding of who you can contact if things arise from that building and pest. If you've already gone under contract on the property, using that building and pest to potentially renegotiate the price that you've bought it for, or invoking your right to terminate because things were too major.
Absolutely, and this is why we started with not having a team of advisors being one of the biggest things that hold people back and causes these down the line mistakes, because if you don't have that support or people guiding you through that process and making you aware of these different things, then a lot of the time you'll oversee them and you might accidentally make a mistake and purchase that property. And all you need to do is go online and type in compound growth calculator, put in your budget, put in 15 years and a 4% compound growth rate, and then compare that to a 6% compound growth rate. And you will see that this is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars down the line. So what a lot of beginner investors do is they actually are trying to look at saving money on the way in. And more often than not, to save money on the way in, you're purchasing a property that doesn't fit the criteria because there's something wrong with that property. If there's nothing wrong with the property, it will more often than not sell for a premium, and more often than not, in a decent market like today up here in Brisbane, will sell relatively quickly as well. Now, the other thing that really impacts people's long-term trajectory with their property investment journey is the negotiation process. You know, this is quite overwhelming because, you know, median house price in Brisbane is now over $750,000. We're talking about a lot of money here. So what are some of the things that you find a lot of investors do when it comes to those negotiations? You know, I see a lot of the time people underpaying, a lot of the time people overpaying, and that really affecting them. So how can we go about, you know, getting better results when it comes to the negotiations?
Yeah, of course. And we touched on a little bit earlier today about lack of market knowledge, and that comes from sort of maybe limited experience in that particular market. So to avoid overpaying for a property in a particular market, I think you've got to really reverse engineer it like we spoke about before. Go back to the sales history, look at what similar properties are selling for, figure out whether the property has been listed below market value for comparable properties or above market value, and from there you can get an understanding of maybe what it should be worth. And it also comes from asking the right questions. So the agent is actually quite a good source of knowledge and truth when it comes to the market. They can be your best friend or your worst enemy, and they can take advantage of you if they know you don't know the market. So asking them the right questions really helps get an understanding of why the sellers are selling the property. Is there any terms or conditions that are going to help you be in a position to negotiate a better price on the property because you're able to offer the seller maybe a favourable term? Is there anything that I guess is working in your favour with what else is going on in the market? Is there other offers on the property? Are you the only person out there, and are they just trying to jump up your price when you're not really in a competitive situation? Or if you are in a competitive situation, just digging a little bit deeper and finding out how many other offers might be on the table. So if it is a competitive situation, you're dealing with multiple offers, it's really important to get an understanding of how many other offers are out there, maybe asking the agent what the other buyers are like in terms of their situation. Are they cash buyers? What are their terms? In a multiple offer situation in Queensland, agents legally are not supposed to tell you the price of the other offers or anything like that, but they do legally need to give you a multiple offers form. So if they're not providing that to you, that might give you an indication that maybe it's not as competitive as they're letting on, or maybe you've got more negotiation power than you think. But yeah, there's definitely lots of ways that you can probe the agent a little bit further to get an understanding of what the property is worth, what's likely going to edge you above the other offers, but also get you the best price.
And what I find a lot of the time with beginner investors or average investors is they think that the real estate agents are their friend. Now, the real estate agent will act as your friend 100% of the time. And, you know, we really enjoy the process of negotiating with the agents because, you know, that's their job. They're professional salespeople, and they're legally supposed to get the sellers the best possible result. So now, as the buyer, their job is to get you to pay a higher price so that they are getting the best result for the seller. So you need to be really aware of that so that you are getting the right information. I think asking the right questions is an amazing strategy to overcome all of these things, and doing all of that necessary work and studying the comparable sales and asking the real estate agent for a comparative market analysis if necessary as well. And all of that will give you the tools that you need, the knowledge that you need to put in the right offer so that you can get the best possible result. Now, the fifth, go Chris.
I was just going to say, and I think another thing is don't be afraid to walk away from a property.
That's great advice.
Buyers agents, we know there's always another property. It sometimes might not feel like that, and you do get emotionally attached to the process because it can be pretty draining and daunting. So you want to get a result, but don't be afraid to walk away. Sometimes that works to your advantage. You call the agent's bluff and they then come back to you. Sometimes it doesn't, and you do have to walk away from what you thought was a great property, but it often opens the door for a better one that might come up in another couple of weeks.
That's so true, and that leads really well into the fifth mistake that a lot of investors make. They either rush into the process and make an emotional decision, or they get too fatigued and never end up doing anything or taking any action. Now, you know, if you rush in and you're making concessions, it can cost you lots of money down the line if you are making a mistake there. But then the opposite is true. If you are feeling too overwhelmed, you're feeling too fatigued, you might take a couple of weeks off, and that could be when the perfect property comes up, or you may never end up taking action and never getting an asset in the market. So, you know, making sure that you do all of the preparation work to put yourself in a position where you can take calculated, knowledgeable and educated action to get the best possible return on your investment. But the reality is, guys, we are all human beings. We are all going to make mistakes, and sometimes surrounding yourself with amazing people, a great mortgage broker, a great accountant, a great property manager, a great buyer's agent, a great town planner, absolutely everybody that you need to support you so that you can lean on them at different stages throughout the journey to get the necessary information to ensure that your property investment business is set up perfectly. But once again, Chris, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise and knowledge surrounding buying property in the Australian property market, because it is quite an overwhelming and challenging process. But if you can do the necessary work, you will actually end up getting the right result. So really appreciate you sharing this. Guys, if you could please subscribe to our YouTube channel, please give this video a like. We know you do. And also share this with somebody that needs to hear it, somebody that might be looking in the market at the moment to expand their property investment portfolio so that they can make the right decisions and obviously avoid making the wrong mistakes.
Whew, that's a wrap. That's a wrap. Have a spin.
Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that.
So nice, eh?
Oh.